This today is going to be worth it. Heading to Hest Bank to do a little bit of photography, catch the high tide, and then about an hour later it's the sunset. I'm also using it as a little bit of exercise, get out of the house, and as a wrecking mission for a higher tide during the day next week. It's about a 30-minute walk from my house. Right, I'm going to head through these railway crossings at Hest Bank. The tide is on its way in, but still quite a way out. I'm going to go, instead of walking through the crossings, I'm going to go over the bridge. There's a train coming. You couldn't make it up. You couldn't make it up. The tide's on its way in, it's still quite a way out. And there, the wooden groynes in the distance, that I'm going to try and attempt to get a picture of with the tide swirling round them. Now is the tide going to come up high enough? Because it's only a 7.24 metres. Next week it is just over 9. I could come out to here, these rocks, and have these rocks in the foreground. I don't know, but if I had my 300mm lens, I could pull in onto that. You've got to be careful on these sands because you don't know where you're going, and I'm not an expert. I'm just playing it by ear. You could get into trouble, especially if the tide's coming in. There are a few more groynes sticking up here, which could be another decent shot. And look, this line going out there. Again, who knows? This is just a recce, just to see where the tide comes in at, how high the tide's coming in, the weather, naff, it's raining. So hopefully I'll be able to come next week when it's a higher tide. I've got a better idea. There's some groynes out there. Again, is it safe to go out there? Will the tide come in behind you? That's what I've got to find out. And in the distance, where I'm going to walk now, some large boulders. Will the tide come up to them? Right, I'm on this solid ground here. Across there are the groynes. This isn't quite nice with the tide coming up around them groynes, but the problem is, this is what I can see, this land here is higher than a lot of this land here, and what you don't want is to be out there photographing that when the tide comes in behind you. And and perhaps cuts you off from getting back. I know it's not critical because the land is only there, but you don't want to get wet, you don't want to get soaked, you don't want it coming above your wellies. So this, like I say, is just a wrecking mission, just to watch where the tide comes up first, how fast, and if it will be viable next week or maybe later today. Get a few shots. I'm going to head over the distance there because you can see the tide is already in over them rocks at the end, and there's a couple of big boulders. Will the water reach that before it reaches this and reaches the groynes in the distance? Let's go and have a look down here. A good idea would be to chat to a local fisherman, something like that, and ask him how far the tide's likely to come up. This could be a decent spot. These three stones, well, one's a boulder and two been put there by man over the past. That could be quite interesting if the tide's up and lapping round there. Right, just talking to the guy there with the dog, and what he told me is that old jetty will be the last thing to be covered, and he stood there when the tide has filled most of this up and you can come back across there. I'm going to walk down to this corner first and have a look. Well, I've walked about 300 metres down the beach, and again got all these rocks here, which with the correct composition and the correct light look quite good. It's looking quite a good area to come. Look at them, two pieces of concrete. They would be good. That would be interesting. Again, there's lots more of these concrete posts or pillars or whatever. Again, with the green moss on, and the light, and the water. That looks quite interesting as well. I'm going to try and get a little bit nearer the edge, get my camera out, do a few shots, and then head back that way. Years ago, and I mean 5-6 years ago, I was going to put my GoPro on the top and try and capture on a time lapse a high tide that would probably come up around the foot of it and then go back out. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that again. I never got round to it, but I am going to do it now. I'm getting into it a little bit more, understanding the tide heights and everything. So if I can see today, when I'm here when the tide comes in, if it's a 6.9 tide, perhaps a 9 metre tide would reach that rock, and with a bit of wind it should be quite good. As you can see, the tide is just touching my tripod leg. Typical, doing a 1/42 composition, and I'm going to have to move back. I hope it doesn't move my tripod. Knowing my luck, it will do. Right, I'm recording an exposure of 1 minute and 18 seconds. I'm a bit up against rushing. I'm rushing as usual, but again I'm only learning, and the tide is coming in pretty quickly, but I should get away with this one. Just a pity about the weather. Typical though, isn't it, when you want to do something in this country. It's quite peaceful, to be honest, but it's just the light that's letting me down. I'm doing a 51-second exposure of the group of rocks there. Right, the big rock there is the rock I was on about putting the GoPro on top when it is a very high tide. But I would say it would have to possibly being 9 metre tide, and I'd have to find some way, maybe taping my old GoPro and put it in a case and try and fasten it down to the top of that rock. Right, I'm going to head back to the wooden groynes further down. We're about 30 minutes off high tide and I don't think it's going to come up much higher. So for future reference, we need at least an 8 metre for it to reach even the end of this shoreline here. Right, I've got a few shots. Again, disappointed. High tide in 10 minutes, it's not going to come up here. But I shall return next week. And hopefully get some better shots. These shots, who knows, they might be alright. It's all a learning curve. But there's enough compositions and things just around here on this little bit of a beach for a number of trips. It's unlimited depending on weather conditions, whether it's frosty, snow, misty, rough seas. It's unlimited. Now it's starting to rain now, so I want to get to the end of here, pack my gear away and head home. I enjoyed myself. Been out for a few hours. That's what it's all about, getting out and enjoying the beautiful fresh air. Until next time.